Hello. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a couple common error messages that you're likely to get in Excel, tell you about what causes them and how to fix them. So as you can see in this spreadsheet, what I have up is just a basic data set. Here you might be thinking about looking up a number of clients that you have based on their age or their portfolio value. And in this data set, it's not too big, so it's manageable. But if you had a much bigger data set, you might have a separate area that actually looks up different clients. So for example, you might want to know what Dante's age is. So one of our ways to do that is with a VLOOKUP. So let's just try our VLOOKUP to start. I'm going to use our VLOOKUP. We'll look up Dante in this array to get his age. We'll get the second value back and type false. And if you're watching carefully, you probably already see that there's an error that's going to happen here. And the error that we're going to get is the name error. And that's because I did not type the function correctly. Right? I typed VLOOKUP instead of VLOOKUP with two O's in the middle. So whenever you see a name error, it's usually telling you that the name of the function that you used isn't working. If you're thinking about doing some of your own coding in VBA and using user-defined functions, it usually means that whatever function you're trying to reference, you didn't use exactly the same name. So that's an important cue to go back and check that you spelled the name of your function or a built-in Excel function exactly correctly. All right, so let's move past this. Let's actually fix this one. Let's go back. And we fixed our VLOOKUP. All right, so now for our second error, let's take this function. First thing I'm going to do is actually lock the lookup reference. And let's copy it over so we also get portfolio value. So now to get portfolio value, we don't want the second column. We now want the third column. So let's go into our function, change that 2 to a 3, and now we get our next error that I want to talk about. And that's the ref error, #ref. And what's happening here is that you're trying to reference a cell that is outside of what the function is looking at. And we can see this by clicking on the function, hitting our F2 key, and we can see that our data set that we're looking at, or that lookup array, only has 2 columns. And so if we're asking it to return the third column, well, the third column does not exist in that data array. So that's what a reference error is telling you, is you're trying to access something that you just don't have access to. So to fix that, we can come back in and let's change our lookup array to include that third column. Now we've fixed the problem. We can actually format this as a $ as well. And then I actually went to go change the number of decimal places, and I got another error message that we see sometimes. This isn't really an error message here. What this is showing you is that there's too many digits in your number to display in the cell. So there are a couple ways to fix this. One is you can actually increase the cell width. So there I just increased the cell width automatically. That's one way to do it. Let's actually undo that. The other way is we can change the number. So let's reduce the number of decimal places. That's another way to fix the problem. But ultimately, it's just telling you there are too many numbers to display in that cell. So you just got to adjust the cell width or how the text is displayed. All right, another error that you might see when you're using things like a VLOOKUP is that, say you didn't reference the number of the column that you wanted back, and you put something that didn't make a lot of sense in. For example, let's just put the word Bob in instead of the column reference number 3. Here we're going to get a value error. And so what a value error usually means is that you're giving an Excel function something that it doesn't expect. In this case, it expects a number. It wants to know the column number that you want returned. But instead of a number, we're giving it a string variable or a word. It doesn't know how to return the Bob column. It only knows how to do 1, 2, or 3. So value usually means there's some issue with the variable type that you're using. You're giving Excel a word when it expects a number, or a number when it expects a word. So that's a cue there to think about what type of data is going into your Excel functions. All right. Another common error, especially with lookup functions, is an NA error. So let's actually look for Dave. So Dave, we're going to look for that in our client list, and we're going to get 2 NA errors. And the reason is when it goes and it looks for Dave in this first column of data, there is no Dave in there. There is a David, so if we put David in, we get answers. How about Tim? Do we see a Tim in there? There's no Tim. So typically what NA errors mean are not available, not applicable. It's just that data is not there. So particularly with lookup functions, it means it's not recognizing what it is that you're looking for. All right, let's put that back. We'll undo that. And let's go ahead and add one more column to our actual set of data here. So here I want to do the portfolio value divided by age. We're just going to add an extra variable. And we're going to calculate it by taking our portfolio value divided by our age. And we'll just copy that down with our double click. And we see kind of two of our error messages, right? The first one is that repeated hashtags. It's just showing us the column's not wide enough. So I'm going to use Alt-HOI to fix that. We'll auto-size the column. But then we see another error message that's pretty common, and that's this div/0 error. What that means is we're trying to divide by 0. And you might say, well, no, there's no 0 there that we're dividing by, so let's look a little closer. Here we're taking a portfolio value divided by an empty cell. So there's nothing in that cell right now. For whatever reason, we didn't have the age of this client, but it's basically interpreting it as a 0 because it's blank. So if that's actually a 0, we still get that same divide by 0 error. If we put an actual age in, now we get a number that works. So divide by 0 or div/0 error is that you're dividing by 0, so just try to fix that when you're looking at some of your math. All right, a couple more math errors that we might run into. First, let's try a sum function. All right, first I'm just going to sum up all these portfolio values. We get 34 million. Sometimes we actually might mess up our formula, though, when we're typing. And say instead of a colon here, we put a space. So we're changing it from a colon to a space. Now we get a null result. All right, null is a pretty rare error. I don't see it very much in the spreadsheets I work in. But what's happening here is it's basically telling you you have a null set or an empty set. And what that means here, and literally what this is trying to do, it's trying to find the intersection between cell D6 and D19. Since there's no common cells between those two, there is no intersection, which is why you get the null message. So that's what it means. So if instead we were to do, say, D6 to D13, space D12 to D19, now we have an intersection. You can actually see it visually there that there are two cells in the intersection of those two sets, and it would sum up those two cells. So that's how that intersection idea works in an Excel formula if you ever see it. But for this purpose, if there's no overlap, that's when we get that null message. This is not typically an error you're going to run into. It usually just means you typed something a little bit wrong in your formula, so watch out for commas, for colons, for that kind of thing. All right, the last error I want to show you is, let's say if we try to make a number really big. So if we raise this thing to the 1000th power, that thing would get really, really big, and we're getting a num error. So it's a num error because the true value goes to infinity. It's too big, the computer cannot handle it. And so the num error is just kind of a way of saying there's something wrong with math somewhere. That's typically what causes it, so you have to kind of think through, could this be kind of like an infinity problem, or is there something else that might be driving this error? So that gives you an idea of the common error messages that you'll see when you're working through some spreadsheets, and hopefully gives you an idea of where they might be coming from so you can try to track down what it is causing the error in your formula.